I'm Stephen Harper. Welcome to Gospel Tangents.
The best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Critics of Joseph Smith have alleged that he changed his version of the first vision accounts over time. Can the accounts be trusted? We're going to get acquainted with Dr. Stephen Harper, author of The First Vision, Memory and Mormon Origins, and we'll talk about how memory changes over time and whether it can be relied upon, especially in Joseph Smith's account of the first vision. So it's going to be a fascinating conversation. We're going to get more acquainted with Dr. Harper. So check it out. All right, welcome to Gospel Tangents. I'm excited to have an awesome expert on the first vision. So could you go ahead and tell us who you are?
Sure. My name is Steve Harper. And I'm no one of consequence, to use that line from The Princess Bride. But I teach church history and the foundations of the Restoration at BYU. I worked on the Saints 4-volume series with a bunch of other folks, and I've been a volume editor of the Joseph Smith papers in the past, and so I study the early history and the revelations of Joseph Smith.
Well, great. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your academic background? Where did you get your bachelor's and master's and PhD and all that stuff?
I went to BYU as an undergraduate, majored in history after dipping my toe into ancient Near Eastern and biblical studies, and getting out of that when I couldn't hack it. And went from there to Utah State for a master's degree in American history. And I had studied paleography, early American handwriting as an undergraduate, and had some really formative experience working with early Latter-day Saint documents, Revelation manuscripts, journals, especially William McClellan's journals and Revelation manuscripts.
Did you read any Hoffman forgeries while you were out?
I did. Even as a teenager, I was reading Hoffman forgeries, unbeknownst to me, until sadly he killed a couple of people, as you know, and the whole thing unraveled on him.
Because he was coming up with something with William McClellan. Right?
Exactly right. That's why, in fact, as an undergraduate, the opportunity came to work on McClellan's documents, because he had rumored that he had McClellan's collection, or he could obtain it. And when the church discovered that it had it all along, it was eager to get it published. The rumors were that the church was suppressing documents. Hoffman was the one who actually started those rumors. So the church was eager to publish the McClellan collection. They asked Jan Ships, a very, very excellent scholar of the Saints and American religion generally, to be the editor. And she collaborated with John Welch at BYU Studies. So BYU Studies and the University of Illinois Press co-published the journals of William McClellan, and I was an editorial assistant at BYU Studies, and I got to read them very closely with Jan Ships. It was a highlight of my undergraduate career to work closely with Jack Welch and Jan Ships, to read those documents and learn from them how to do very close readings of source material and documentary editing. And I was hooked. I went from there to Utah State and did a master's thesis on what early Latter-day Saint missionaries taught, how they taught, who they reached, socioeconomically speaking, what the determinants of conversion were in that environment, and been working on those kinds of questions ever since.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. All right, so your undergraduate at BYU, your master's degree was at Utah State. And
right. Then I didn't know what to do. I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to teach the history of the church. I wanted to teach Joseph Smith's Revelations. So tried to figure out the way to do that. My early church history professor had said, go get a PhD. So I was on that track, but how to pay the bills in the meantime, etc. So I took a job microfilming genealogically valuable records for the church's family history department. And that took me to Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.
Oh, wow.
That was a great experience.
Was that the Wahoos?
Yeah, I think so.
I have a Virginia shirt. I've actually been to a football game there.
Yeah, I think they're in Charlottesville,
about
that's right. 90 miles away. But yeah,
so who's
University
in
of Virginia. The University of Richmond.
Oh,
and,
okay.
VCU.
Oh, they're the Spiders.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So it was a great experience. Met some really wonderful people there, and had some great experiences. I remember filming, from as early as I could get into the library, right up till lunch hour, and then spending my lunch hour in the reading room, digesting anything they had on American religion and so forth, and worked on an article there and published an article that won an award, won the Best Article of the Year award.
Oh, nice.
From the Mormon History Association during that year. It was a good experience for me. And went from there to Alexandria, Virginia, and from there, where I worked in Washington, D.C., actually, filming records. It sounds sort of sexy, but I was in the D.C. Record Center in a very sort of sketchy place in Washington, D.C. And
you didn't run into Nicolas Cage looking for hidden treasure?
no, I didn't. That would have been cool, but I didn't. And went from there to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where I continued filming records, but also started a PhD program at Lehigh University, which was a great fit for me. It's a small little school with Ivy League envy, but a really good
They spell
early
Lehigh
American.
wrong, though.
They do.
They stick a GH on the end.
They haven't, I don't think, seen the Book of Mormon version of it, or the roller mill. So I'm not sure they know how to spell it, but I enjoyed that experience very much. It was a good fit for me, and
And so
great
you got your
experience.
PhD from Lehigh?
I did.
Oh, wow. Well, very cool. So, and I see we're in a room and you can kind of see behind me, we got a lot of sports memorabilia. I don't talk to many historians who are big as sports fans as me, but I think you might be.
Well, before I ever imagined a person could make a living being a historian, I thought the only option was to be an NFL quarterback or a first baseman, maybe in the NFL or in the Major League Baseball.
Uh-huh.
And if I had the ability to do that, I maybe have gone on to do that.
I would have too. I was going to play shortstop for the Dodgers.
Right, that would be a good choice. So I enjoy it, and I've got jerseys from my kids, and my father-in-law's Letterman sweater and one of his track shoes. He holds a record for the hurdles in his Southern California high school, and so it's a fun room where we collect stuff from the kids'
and people can't
accomplishments.
see behind me, but there's a Blackfoot basketball thing right above your head there. And my mom was from Blackfoot, but there was no Blackfoot High School when she was around. So
that is a practice jersey from being a bench warmer on the high school basketball.
that's what I was too, a bench warmer.
Yeah, that's all that is.
Although I can say that we did take state, so at least I was a bench warmer on the state champs. So.
That's impressive. For sure.
All right. Well, cool. I know it's sad to me that people don't like my little jabber about sports, but I'm a big sports fan, so it's nice to find a fellow fan. So that's great. All right. Well, tell us about your book. You've got the book on the first vision. Go ahead and hold it up.
All right.
And a little higher. So this is your latest book on the first vision.
Yeah.
Memory and Mormon Origins. So tell us about your book.
Well, it is an ambitious work. I like to always be doing something that really pushes me, that stretches me, and I wanted to publish something with an academic publisher, a prestigious academic press, right? Oxford was as high as I could aim, and a lot of other great books were coming from them on Mormon studies topics and all kinds of topics. So I pitched an idea to them that would be the first marriage between Mormon history and memory studies. Both of those fields are robust, lots of interesting advances, really great things being published, but nobody had ever done a full-length study that really welded those two kinds of things together. So I wanted to dig into the historical record of the first vision with the methodology and interpretive framework that was based a lot on memory studies, the science the neuroscience and the psychology of memory. So there's a theoretical book by Thomas Anastasio and his colleagues about the consolidation of memory, how short-term and especially long-term memories consolidate, and how that happens inside an individual and on a collective basis, and how those processes are analogous with each other. And that book was compelling to me. I was quite taken by its premises, by its findings, by its models, its theoretical capabilities. And I found that the historical record of the first vision mapped onto that very nicely. So I used that theoretical framework and a lot of other psychology of memory and intimate study of the first vision sources, the record that Joseph Smith and others left us. And that was the groundwork for what I thought was a great idea. And other people seemed to buy into that. Oxford University Press bought into it. The timing was good. I ended up ultimately getting it ready for the bicentennial. So published the book in 2019, and of course 2020 celebrated the bicentennial of the first vision. So timing was good. It gave me plenty of time to work on it, and I decided that the first part of the book would be about Joseph Smith's memory. How did he consolidate? How did he form his memories of the first vision? And what's the nature of those memories? And the premise really from the beginning is that memories are not what we often think they are. Memories aren't like some kind of data that you can record to a DVD or keep in a file folder somewhere where you just retrieve it and it's the same data every time. We talk about memory that way, but it is not how it works. So an autobiographical memory, like Joseph's memories of his first vision, are real-time creations. He produced the memory every time he told the memory or recorded it. And he produced it out of the past, for sure. Okay, there were components of memory that he used, but he also always had some present context that was very essential to the way the memory shaped. This is what we all do. We might think we don't, but this is what we all do. We have a present situation. It prompts us in some way or other to think about our past, and we gather up pieces of the past and we fuse them together and form them in a way that makes sense in our present and that addresses the needs of our present. That's how Joseph Smith came up with his memories of the first vision. So people might ask, are they accurate or inaccurate? It depends what you mean. Memories are accurate and memories are inaccurate, both. They're not perfect or distorted. They're both of those things. And there's no way around that, not for anybody. So memories are what they are, and his are fascinating. And so the first chunk of the book tells about how he formed those memories. What was the present context in which he formed each of his various memories of his first vision that we have record of? And then the second part of the book is how a collective memory first formed. How did the earliest Latter-day Saints beside Joseph Smith, who came to know about his vision, remember it? And what roles did they have? And how did that work? And that part goes up through the canonization of Joseph Smith's history in the Pearl of Great Price in 1880. And then the third chunk of the book is about contested memory. It's about the fight over what the first vision means, over whether Joseph's memories are accurate or inaccurate or distorted or made up or a half-remembered dream, as Fawn Brodie said, or all the various claims. The stakes have really been raised on the first vision in the last 50 years or more. And so that's a compelling story.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So I'm curious because you've got a background in history and you're going into all this memory stuff, which sounds more like a scientific thing. Did you consult with like a neurologist or a memory expert or something as you wrote this book?
I did. When I first started, I talked a lot to my brother, who was a psychologist, a PhD psychologist, and I said, what about this idea? What about that? And he said, that'd work. That'd be good. And he pointed me in the right directions. Here are some things you need to read. Here are some things you need to stop assuming. One thing that historians commonly assume is that memories are like something that you can carbon date, right? That there's kind of a predictable rate of radioactive decay attached to a memory. You'll hear people talk about it like that, right? Well, this memory was 18 years after the vision, so it's not as good as one that was 10 years or 12 years after the vision. There's no basis for making that judgment. It's an assumption, but there's no good criteria that's testable or verifiable. It's unscientific, in other words. So
now, doesn't that fly against the normal training of a historian, though? Because usually you say the first accounts are the best accounts, and then they get worse as time goes on.
That's my point, right? That's the assumption of a historical method. On what is it based?
Well,
Right.
don't we have centuries of historians that do it that way?
Maybe so, but a point I want to make in the book is it's much better to take each memory on its own merits, evaluate it itself, right? What is the present? What is the present set of circumstances that surround it, and how has it been transmitted down to us? That has a lot more to do with how much confidence we can place in it than if it was immediately after the vision or much later. And it's not as clear cut as a recent memory is good and a distant memory is bad. There is a whole lot more potential for interpretive memory in a memory that's many years removed. So let me say what I mean about that. So there's factual memory, right? If you're thinking in terms of Joseph Smith's vision accounts, the factual memory is things like, I read James 1 and 5. I went to the woods. I said a prayer after I knelt. I saw two personages, right? A few days after, I talked to a Methodist minister. He said these things. Factual memory. Those are the kind of things that you could think of as sort of objectively true, that somebody outside of Joseph Smith's mind could have observed, perhaps. But there's a whole lot of subjective experience that you can only capture from Joseph's mind, and that also changes over time. And that gives us interpretive memory, which is fascinating. It's at least as interesting as the facts of the matter. So I sometimes say it this way: when you've got Joseph's accounts spread out from 1832 to 1842, you can experience the vision not just as he experienced it at the time, you can tell some about what he experienced over time. And one good way to see that is to look closely at the accounts as they interpret the vision. So there are 600 words or so of interpretive memory in the account that's in the Pearl of Great Price. It felt like I was Paul before Agrippa. It seemed like ever since I was an infant, they persecuted me. I have reflected then and since, right? All those things tell us that Joseph is doing work in his mind about what this feels like over time. He's reflecting on the vision. And as he does so, he finds meaning in it that wasn't there the day of. He couldn't have walked out of the woods and had that interpretation. He would have had different interpretive components to work with in the short term than he has 12 years later, 18 years later. So one of the most interesting things is to not reduce memories to thinking that they're reliable to the degree that they're proximate to the event and unreliable in proportion to how distant they are from the event. That's not a good way to gauge it. There's no way to test it. It's just an assumption. So I've tried to abandon that assumption and evaluate every one of the accounts on a much more scientifically sound criteria. How does Joseph remember based on what his present is and what his past was? And that's the better way, I think, to evaluate a memory.
Well, because I know I interviewed Dan Vogel a couple of years ago. And
you might have heard me paraphrasing Dan Vogel a minute ago when I said, how did he remember the vision at the time? How certain can we be, given that the records are distant, Dan Vogel asks, that Joseph remembered the vision as he experienced it at the time? My answer to that is, I don't know, but one thing we can say is we can watch him remember it over time.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting to see how you, like you said, in part one, you started with Joseph Smith and his memories, and then part two, you talked kind of about the collective memory of the church. I know you really got into Orson Pratt. It seems like he was a very big driver
Indeed.
Of how all of us remember is because of a lot of his sermons in General Conference. And then the end, the contested area. So
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Stephen Harper. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about whether there were really revivals in the Palmyra area in 1820.
There is evidence for a camp meeting in the newspaper in Palmyra in 1820. Professor Bachman found it, quoted it in his resulting article and work, right? But, is that an unusual excitement on the subject of religion? Professor Bachman didn't think that one mention of that was, but he found plenty of examples of spikes in church attendance and church membership in various churches within a 5, 10, 15-mile concentric circles. He found, in other words, evidence for unusual excitement on the subject of religion in the region or district of country that Joseph was saying.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, sign up at patreon.com/gospeltangents, and for $5 a month, you can hear the entire interview without any interruptions. If you'd like to see the whole video, that's just $8 a month, and you can sign up either at youtube.com/gospeltangents or on our website at gospeltangents.com and click the yellow subscribe button. Or you can go to patreon.com/gospeltangents, and I'll just need to make sure that we're Facebook friends, and I'll add you to our insiders group, and you can see the entire interview uncut. If you'd like to get PDF transcripts of our interviews, those are just $10 a month. And for just $15 a month, I will send you paperback versions of our transcripts as soon as they come out. Or, of course, you can buy them on Amazon as well. Go to Amazon.com and do a search for Gospel Tangents interview, and you can see all of our transcripts there. Don't forget to sign up for our updates at Facebook.com/gospeltangents. Of course, you can follow us at Gospel Tangents on Twitter. To hear our interviews updated to your podcast player, go to tinyurl.com/gospeltangents, and make sure you give us a 5-star review. And of course, you should show your support for Gospel Tangents with one of these cool t-shirts, like this green one, or light blue, sport gray, royal blue, purple, of course black, beautiful gold, and of course Utah red. I've probably left out some colors, but if you want to see more, go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get one of these. So once again, thanks for listening. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some more of our great videos. Thanks again.